Okay, Mr. Mayor, we're now live.
Thank you, Neil. Welcome. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for attending this digital meeting of the council. Before we begin, I would like the clerk to send out some housekeeping measures. Neil?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to clarify that the council summons and reports for the meeting are available on the council's website. If the meeting becomes inaccessible to the public on YouTube, then the Mayor will adjourn to allow for reconnection. If access cannot be restored, then the remaining business will be considered at a time and date to be arranged. A slide will be displayed on YouTube if this is the case. If a member becomes disconnected, the meeting will again adjourn to allow time for reconnection. As the budget is on the summons, it may be required to adjourn the meeting to consider any amendments proposed. When members are not addressing the meeting, it would be appreciated if you could ensure that your microphone is muted.
Thank you, Neil. To ensure that we have a quorum, I will now ask Tony Cox, the monitoring officer, to call each member of the council one by one to introduce themselves and to confirm they can see and hear the proceedings. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bird.
Councillor Mike Bird, I'm the leader of the council. I can see and hear.
Councillor Nawaz.
Councillor Ashton Nawaz, leader of the Labour Group.
Councillor Shires.
Councillor Ian Shires, the leader of the Liberal Democrat group on the council. I can see and hear.
Councillor Ali.
Councillor Ghazali for Birches Limo. Councillor for Birches Limo, I can see and hear.
Councillor Allen.
Councillor Brad Allen, Councillor for Bloxwich West Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Andrew.
Councillor Adrian Andrew, Deputy Leader of the Council, I can see and hear.
Councillor Barker.
Dan Barker, Councillor for Shorteeth, I can see and hear.
Councillor Bashir.
Councillor Hadran Bashir, Charles Paulsbury, I can see and hear.
Councillor Seabot.
Councillor Chris Bott, I can see and hear.
Councillor Peabot.
I can see and hear.
Councillor Burley.
I'm present, I'm correct and can hear and see. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
I can see and hear.
Councillor Chatter.
Councillor Chatter for Shorteeth, I can see and hear.
Councillor Clark.
Councillor Clark, see and hear.
Councillor Cooper.
Councillor Cooper, Councillor for Shorteeth, I can see and hear.
Councillor D. Coughlin.
Councillor Diane Coughlin for William South, I can see and hear.
Councillor S. Coughlin.
Councillor Sean Coughlin, William South, I can see and hear.
Councillor Craddock.
Councillor Stephen Craddock, on the portfolio holder for health and wellbeing, and I can see and hear. Thank you.
Councillor Creaney. Councillor Creaney. Councillor Creaney.
Sorry, Tony, can I come in there?
Yes.
Yes, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Creaney has submitted his apologies, but we've not got to that stage yet.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor S. Ditter.
I can see and hear, thank you.
Councillor Douglas Moore.
Councillor Brian Douglas Moore, Streetley Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ken Ferguson, Brown Hills Ward, I can see and hear. Councillor J. Fitzpatrick.
Councillor Julie Fitzpatrick, I can see and I can hear.
Councillor Follows.
Follows, Bloxwich West, I can see and hear.
Councillor Gulter Sib.
Councillor Naheed Coultersip, Peck Ward, I can see and I can hear.
Councillor Harris.
Councillor Anthony Harris, Aldridge North, Walsall Wood, I confirm I can see and hear.
Councillor Harrison.
Councillor Louise Harrison, Bloxwich West Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Hickin.
Adam Hickin, I can see and hear.
Councillor Hussain.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Kizar Hussain, Clegg Ward, I can see and hear you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor James. Councillor James. Councillor Jevons.
Lee Jevons, Birchall's Leemore, and I have sound and vision.
Councillor Johal.
Councillor Satcho, Half Street Lee, I can see and hear.
Councillor Jukes.
Councillor Jukes, Birchall's Leemore, and I can see and hear. Thank you.
Councillor Court.
Councillor Court for Oldham Central South, I can see and hear.
Councillor Longy.
Councillor Marco Longy, I can see and hear.
Councillor Martin.
Councillor Rose Martin, Cabinet Member, Adult Social Care, can see and hear.
Councillor Mazar.
Councillor Mother, saying Matthews Wood, I can see and hear, Chair.
Councillor Murray.
Councillor John Murray, Aldridge Central and South, I can see and hear.
Councillor Nasreen.
Councillor Nasreen, I can see and hear.
Councillor A. Nazir. Councillor A. Nazir. Councillor M. Nazir.
Councillor M. Nazir, Paul Through Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Neville. Councillor Neville. Yep. Councillor Perry.
Councillor Gary Perry, Peltham Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Assab.
Councillor Wahid Rassa for the Paddock Ward, I can see and I can hear. Thank you.
Councillor Rattigan.
Councillor Rattigan, Lorna Rattigan for Rushall Shellfield, and I can see and hear.
Councillor Robertson.
Councillor Ian Robertson, Blakeville Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Samra.
Councillor Suki Samra from Streetley Ward, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Councillor Starohi.
Councillor Hook Black, I can see and hear you.
Councillor Sears.
Sears, Aldridge North and Walsall Wood, I can see and hear.
Councillor Sohal. Councillor Sohal. Councillor C. Statham.
Corinne Statham, Bloxbridge East, I can see and hear.
Councillor M. Statham.
Councillor Mark Statham, Bloxbridge East, I can see and hear.
Councillor Toe.
Councillor Chris Toe, Code Member Education and Skills, Member for Fleecy Park Farm Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Underhill.
Councillor Underhill, Benton Darston North, I can see and hear.
Councillor Ward.
Councillor Matt Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Wade.
Yeah, Steve Wade, Brownells Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Waters.
Councillor Vera Waters, Rushall Shellfield Ward, and I can confirm I can see and hear.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, Councillor Tim Wilson, Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Member for Aldridge Central and South, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Councillor Worrell. Councillor Worrell. Councillor Young.
Anne Young, Blakeney Ward, I can see and hear.
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that the meeting is quorate. For members of the public who may be watching, this means that there are enough members present for the meeting to be lawful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We shall now continue with the meeting. Item 1. As I'm presiding over the meeting, it is not necessary to consider item 1 on the summary. Item 2, apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Neville. Are there any further apologies for tonight's meeting?
Yes, Chair. Can I put in apologies for Councillor Carl Creamy, please?
Is there any more apologies?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I may intervene and just ask members when they're not speaking to put their microphones on mute, please. We are getting a little background noise.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. We shall now proceed to item 3. Item 3, to approve as a correct record and sign the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 18th of January 2021. Item 4 to be approved as a correction to the minutes held on the 27th of February 2020. I shall take item 3 and 4 together and so move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January 2021, copies have been sent to each member of the council, be approved as a correct record, and that the correction to the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of February 2020 be approved. Can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Do any members wish to speak to the minutes?
Mr. Mayor, I can see councillor Sohal wishes to address the meeting.
So sorry to interrupt. Could you can I ask Tony if I've been? Did you hear me? I was present.
Councillor Sohal, I didn't hear your name when you were called, but you clearly are present, so I will mark you present accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The vote of the minutes will be conducted by the way of a roll call, which will be undertaken by the monitoring officer, Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bird.
In favour.
Councillor Nawaz.
In favour.
Councillor Shires.
In favour.
Councillor Ali.
In favour.
Councillor Allen.
In favour.
Councillor Andrew.
In favour.
Councillor Barker.
In favour.
Councillor Bashir.
In favour.
Councillor C. Bott.
In favour.
Councillor P. Bott.
In favour.
Councillor Burley. Councillor Burley. I think Councillor Burley's microphone's on mute, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Burley.
In favour.
In favour.
Thank you, Councillor Burley. Councillor Butler.
In favour.
Councillor Chatter.
In favour.
Councillor Clark.
In favour.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor D. Coughlin.
In favour.
Councillor S. Coughlin.
In favour.
Councillor Craddock.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor S. Ditter.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Douglas Moore.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
In favour.
Councillor Follows.
In favour.
Councillor Gultazib.
In favour.
Councillor Harris.
In favour.
Councillor Harrison.
In favour.
Councillor Hickin.
In favour.
Councillor Hussain.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor James. Councillor Jevons.
In favour.
Councillor Johal.
In favour.
Councillor Jukes.
In favour.
Councillor Core.
In favour.
Councillor Longy.
In favour.
Councillor Martin.
In favour.
Councillor Mazar.
In favour.
Councillor Murray.
In favour.
Councillor Nazreen.
In favour.
Councillor A. Nazir.
In favour.
Councillor M. Nazir.
In favour.
Councillor Perry.
In favour.
Councillor Asab.
In favour.
Councillor Rattigan.
In favour.
Councillor Robertson.
In favour.
Councillor Samra.
In favour.
Councillor Sarohi.
In favour.
Councillor Sears.
In favour.
Councillor Sohal.
In favour.
Councillor C. Statham.
In favour.
Councillor M. Statham.
In favour.
Councillor Toe.
In favour.
Councillor Underhill.
In favour.
Councillor Ward.
In favour.
Councillor Wade.
In favour.
Councillor Waters,
In favour.
Councillor Wilson,
In favour.
Councillor Worrell,
In favour.
Councillor Young.
In favour.
Mr. Mayor, I confirm that all elected members present in the meeting have voted in favour of item 3 and 4. Therefore, they are duly carried.
Thank you, Tony. I declare the minutes are approved. Item 5, declarations of interest. I call upon the monitoring officer to give some advice in relationship to the budget item. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can confirm that I've granted a dispensation under Section 33 of the Localism Act 2011 to allow members to participate and vote in the setting of the council budget. I've also granted a dispensation to all members of the council to allow them to participate and vote on the report relating to members' allowances.
Thank you, Tony. Have members got any further declarations of interest relevant to the meeting this evening? No. Thank you. I shall now move on to item 6. Item 6, Local Government Access to Information Act 1985 as amended. There are no items to be heard in the private session. Item 7, Mayor's announcement. It is with sadness that I refer to the recent death of former councillor Dave Turner. Dave was a councillor for Brownhills Ward from May 1999 to May 2014. Do any members wish to speak in tribute to Mr. Turner? Councillor Bird. Councillor Bird.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. David, or Dave as we know him, may not have been known to many of the members of the council at present, but in actual fact was quite an individual, to say the least. I recall when he stood for Brownhills, and I think he first won by 2 votes, and then the following year he won by 4. And I commented how close it was, and he retorted, well, I doubled my majority. And he was right, of course, but that's the kind of individual he was, a very dour sense of humour. But Dave was sadly in a nursing home for a time, and then was transferred to the manor where he contracted COVID. And sadly, he passed away quite recently, leaving his sister to arrange things which no doubt members will get advice of when those arrangements are published. But Dave, although was not a councillor for a great deal of years, he was certainly well known in the Aldridge and Brownhills area, and I hope that this council will record his service in the normal way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Nawaz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as the leader has said, some of us don't know Mr. Turner, but on behalf of my group and myself, we wish to pass on our condolences to his family. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to do the same on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group. I do remember Dave Turner, and Mike describes him very well. I'm just sad to hear about his passing, so we'd like to pass our condolences on to his family. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Underhill. Councillor Underhill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually do remember Dave very well indeed, and I always found him an extremely nice person to have a chat to. And I distinctly remember once doing a surgery over in Brownhills for one of our councillors, and Dave said, "What are you doing here? It's not come to do a surgery for one of the other councillors." "Oh, you should have given me a tinkle. I'd have done it for you." He said it wouldn't have mattered. And I said, "Well, that's very nice of you." And he said, "Well, you know, that's what we're here for, isn't it?" And that was that, I think, said that about Dave. He was like that. So really, I think just from my point of view, I remember a very nice person, a very unusual person, but certainly we lose a lot of these people. Well, it's our loss, isn't it, that we've lost people like Dave. So I too remember him very fondly.
Thank you, Councillor Underhill. Councillor Martin. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I remember
Councillor Turner. I served with him on the audit committee for many years. He was a lovely and funny person, and he'll be missed. Condolences to his family.
Thank you, councillors. I move that this council have heard with deep regret of the death of Mr. Dave Turner, who was a member of Walsall Metropolitan Borough Council from May 1999 to May 2014. This council places on record their appreciation of his service to the borough over a period of many years and expresses condolences to his family at this sad time. I call upon members and officers to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect, and would ask the clerk to confirm when the minutes has elapsed.
Mr. Mayor, members, thank you. A minute has now elapsed.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. I shall now move on to item 8. Item 8, to receive any petitions. Please note that this is a digital meeting. You will be able to notify the council of any petitions you wish to submit. Petitions will then need to be delivered to Democratic Services as provided electronically. Have members got any petitions they would like to submit?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Worrell.
Yes, I have submitted a petition in relation to a request for traffic calming in the Barnes Lane and Westgate area of Rushall, and Neil has got everything he needs in terms of the petition.
Thank you, Councillor Worrell. Councillor Waters.
I'm actually also a Rushall councillor, and my name is actually mentioned in the petition. However, in the petition, it actually states to removal of the HGVs off Barnes Lane. The residents that I represent are not with this. They are against
Councillor
this.
Waters.
They don't know
Councillor
problem.
Waters. Can you shut up, Councillor Waters? I don't think that's anything to do with this. Can we move on? Thank you. Item 9A, Corporate Plan 2021-2022 refreshed. I call upon Councillor Baird to move the recommendations of Cabinet. Can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Baird, present the report.
Yes, as you can see, the refresh of the corporate plan is mid-term, and in actual fact will be refreshed and rewritten going into 21-22 and further on from there on. But we are in difficult times, changing times, and as a result, the corporate plan reflects those changes. And I therefore move the resolution before you for the corporate plan refresh. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do any members wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Shires.
Mr. Mayor, I think you need a seconder.
Seconded. I'll second it.
Has that been seconded?
Has. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Voting against this item could be misconstrued. There are those who would say that by voting against the current administration's corporate plan, that we are against the sentiment behind the 5 areas of focus. That's not the case. Of course, we want to see things like children getting the best start in life and our communities prospering. So in order that we don't get misunderstood, I'm going to spell out just why we will not be voting for a Conservative corporate plan, or for that matter, a Conservative budget. We are voting against the corporate plan tonight because we would do it differently. Our approach would be built on lessons learned during this pandemic. We would build on 5 principles of well-being, and these would be supporting the mental well-being of our citizens with a particular emphasis on the under 25s, reducing child poverty and improving family well-being, including addressing the worsening problem of violence in the home, lifting incomes by improving access to good education, training and upskilling opportunities, building a thriving local economy in the digital age through innovation, social and economic opportunity, and finally creating opportunities which will aid transition to a sustainable, low emission based local economy. We would produce a wellbeing budget to deliver a wellbeing corporate plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Nawaz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And tend to agree with Councillor Shires. It doesn't mean that we are against those things that have been put into the corporate plan, but of course we are a different political party and we would have different priorities and our plan would be different. So today we will not be voting for this, but that said, it doesn't mean that we would disagree with some of the things in there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bird, you have a right to reply.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find it quite flabbergasting, really, that there is no doubt a misunderstanding by Councillor Shires and perhaps Councillor Nawaz as well. Much of what Councillor Shires says is embedded in the way this council works. And in view of the fact there's only 2 Liberals on this council, it's highly unlikely we'll ever see a corporate plan anywhere in the near future. So what he has to say really doesn't worry me. And the people out there should understand this administration have all of the things embedded in the council, in particular mental health and looking after those who are least fortunate.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. As this matter requires a formal decision, I shall now call upon the monitoring officer to undertake a roll call on the motion. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall now call each member in turn and ask that you state whether you are for, against or abstain from the motion. I shall confirm the result at the end of the roll call. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
Against.
Councillor Ali.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Andrew.
For.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Bashir.
Abstain.
Councillor C. Bott.
Abstain.
Councillor P. Bott.
Abstain.
Councillor Burley.
Abstain.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Chatter.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor D. Coughlin. Councillor D.
Sorry, abstain.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor S. Coughlin.
Abstain.
Councillor Craddock.
For.
Councillor Ditter.
Abstain.
Councillor Douglas Moore.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Abstain.
Councillor Follows.
For.
Councillor Gultasib.
Abstain.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Hickin.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
Abstain.
Councillor James. Councillor Jevons.
Abstain.
Councillor Johal.
For.
Councillor Dukes,
Abstain.
Councillor Core,
4.
Councillor Longy,
4.
Councillor Martin,
4.
Councillor Mazar, Councillor Mazar,
Abstain.
Councillor Murray, 4. Councillor Nasreen,
Abstain.
Councillor A Nazir,
Abstain.
Councillor M Nazir,
Abstain.
Councillor Perry,
4.
Councillor Assab,
4.
Councillor Rattigan,
4.
Councillor Robertson,
Abstain.
Councillor Samra,
4.
Councillor Sarohi,
Abstain.
Councillor Sears,
4.
Councillor Sohal,
4.
Councillor C Statham,
4.
Councillor M Statham,
4.
Councillor Toe,
4.
Councillor Underhill,
Abstain.
Councillor Ward,
Abstain.
Councillor Wade,
Abstain.
Councillor Waters,
4.
Councillor Wilson,
4.
Councillor Worrell,
Abstain.
Councillor Young.
Abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that 31 members voted in favour, 2 against and 24 abstained. I would therefore suggest that the motion is carried.
Thank you, Tony. I declare that the recommendation is approved as set out.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item 9B, recommendation of Cabinet Corporate Budget Plan 21/22 to 2023/24, incorporating the Capital Strategy and the Treasury Management Investment Strategy 2021/22. I remind members that in accordance with the Council's Procedure Rule 17.8, a recorded vote will be taken on any decision relating to the Council's budget or Council tax. I confirm that the final precepts and settlements have now been received and there are no changes required to the figures in the budget recommendation. I call upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendations of Cabinet. Councillor Bird. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just formally move the recommendations as set out on the council summons and seek a seconder?
Formally seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bird.
Can I just, there are quite genuinely a lot of figures within the documentation, as you see, but I think the first thing I have to say is pay tribute and thanks to the finance team in total, headed up by Deborah Heinson and Vicky Buckley, who, without whose help, I would not be in a position to present this budget to you this evening. The key heading messages I would give you is this. Pre-COVID-19, the Council's in a strong financial position with an ambitious transformation agenda designed to deliver a sustainable council well into the future.
Councillor Bird, is this your report?
Yes.
Right, I didn't hear you say that you were going to present your report. Carry on, Councillor Bird.
All right, yeah. In common with all the councils, COVID-19 has severely challenged the council's finances and the resources available to deliver change. Significant resources diverted into the fight against COVID-19. The additional government grants announced for COVID-19 in 2021-22 are welcome, and our forecast costs in 21-22 at the moment are covered. This does depend on how long it all goes on and for whether the delivery of the 29 million of savings in 2021-22 are disrupted by a focus on COVID-19 response rather than the delivery of savings. Therefore, we expect that the government continues to reimburse us pound for pound. Alongside this, we also expect there to be a long-term sustainable funding solution for local government and indeed social care. Our budget is balanced for the next 3 years. We are investing significantly in our frontline services, caring for our young, elderly and vulnerable residents. And doing so, to pay for this and the shortfall in overall funding, we have identified £29 million of savings to be delivered and are proposing a council tax increase of 4.9%. This is made up of 3%, which is ring fence for adult social care, and 1.99% being the general reserve. It is fair to say that as we are living with COVID going forward, adult social care is without doubt a needs-led service. And as a result, it is imperative that we do our utmost, not only to protect the businesses that provide that social and adult social care, but in actual fact, look after our residents as easily and indeed as effectively as possible going forward. To pay for these shortfalls in overall funding, we have identified, as I've already said, £29 million of the savings. We are committed to delivering our transformation programme to improve our customers' experience as they contact us for support and advice. The revenue budget is a balanced budget for 2021-22, and I think we would all have to agree, no matter what political party you are, that in itself is a feat in the difficulty we've experienced with COVID over the last 12 to 15 months. We also have the balanced budget for 3 years going forward to 23-24, subject to the delivery of a further £65 million of the savings as set out in the budget report. But in doing so, we've made total investments of £29 million for 21-22 and a further £31 million over the following 2 years, which is giving you £60 million in total. A council tax of 4.9% is within the government referendum limit, and as I've already said, this is 1.99% for the general reserve and 3% for adult social care, equivalent to a Band D council tax of £1,871.87 per annum. This council tax increase is £1.71 increase per week, or 24 pence a day, for a Band D, or £1.14 increase per week, or 16 pence per day for a Band A. 67.5% of residents are in Band A and B, increasing to 83.5%, including in Band C. I think people will have to agree that an increase of this minor nature represents good value for money for the services that this council offer. The gross expenditure for 21-22 is a figure of 658 million, which is circa 56% funded from government grants and only 20% from council tax. This allays the fears and indeed the myths that people believe that their council tax provides the money for all the services that this council deliver on a daily basis. £8 million is being spent on creating an environment where businesses can invest and everyone who wants a job can access one. £210 million has been invested into education, training and skills to enable children and adults to fulfil their personal development. Going forward, we have £197 million being invested on people to live a good quality of life and feel that they belong within Walsall, whatever their status may be. £21 million is being spent on helping make people healthy and be encouraged to get the support when they need it, and following a £63 million to support children to thrive emotionally, physically, mentally, and feel they are achieving the potential and to feel safe. All of those are important as we go forward. £5 million is being invested on supporting housing needs and £53 million to ensure that people are proud of their vibrant town and districts and communities. Town centres are suffering across the UK, and as a result, we now have to reinvent those town centres and only investment will help that reinvention occur as quickly as possible. Moving on to the capital programme, we have a total investment in 2021-22 of £104 million, with a further £104 million the following 2 years, and over £200 million investment over the next 3 years. Over these 3 years, we are investing in £17 million on fixing and improving our roads and bridges, £3 million for 2 new rail stations, both at Willenhall and Darlaston, £13 million on supporting our vulnerable and older residents to maintain their independence in their own homes, £14 million improving our schools estate, £20 million on improving recycling, including a new waste management facility and a new West Midlands-wide recycling facility. Further on, we go to £56 million of council funds to regenerate the borough through major capital schemes such as the Walsall Town Centre Master Plan, the Willenhall Garden City, town investment plans to Walsall and Bloxwich, and the Future High Streets Fund in the capable hands of my colleague, Councillor Andrew. A further 21 million will go on regenerating our borough through our Black Country LEP partnership. We're also investing in technology to improve our services to customers, including how our customers interact with us and maintaining the buildings and protecting our staff and visitors, ensuring a COVID-safe environment. That in itself is a moving feast. Nobody knows when and if COVID will certainly die down from the levels we've seen, but I think we have to admit going forward, COVID is here to stay. And unfortunately, people have got to adapt their lifestyle, whether that be their working lifestyle or their social lifestyle, to accommodate that. So this council, like all, has suffered greatly from loss of income. Our leisure centres have all been closed, but government grant has assisted us in getting this budget balanced for this year and going forward. But it is not without hard work. And that hard work has been with all of the staff, which I thank them publicly, not only the finance staff, but all of the staff who we appreciate on a daily basis, that this service in many areas is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service. And whilst we will get criticism as elected members, and no doubt there'll be some later on in the agenda, what people have to understand is there are officers who probably they never see, who never get the credit for the efforts they put in to produce the services that are expected and indeed taken for granted by many of our residents. I remember at the beginning of this pandemic, when people were ringing me because they couldn't get their brown bins collected and their grass waste disposed of. And I said then, and I repeat now, I'll take you to the Manor Hospital and I'll take you to the ICU unit. I'll then take you down to the cemeteries in the borough. Those people would love your dilemma. And sadly, we are here administering that pandemic some 15 months further on. Who would have thought we were all having meetings, talking to each other on computer screens? And I say I'm pleased and proud about that, because of the investment this administration made in technology has helped us to move almost seamlessly into virtual meetings on every occasion. The days are gone when great big meetings of 20 and 30 and 40 people in one room, all vying for something to say. But in actual fact, we are now working on this particular virtual reality, but still running our services, I believe, seamlessly. It's business as usual in Walsall, and hopefully the future will be better for all of our citizens on the administration's investments that we're now making. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Before I invite members to speak, I would remind members that the motion moved and seconded shall be debated before any amendments are put. This will ensure that the matter is considered. I now call upon members wishing to speak to the motion. Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I start, I'd like to just reiterate what Councillor Bader said in regards to thanking the staff, Deborah and Vicky and their team, for helping me and the Shadow Cabinet and the group over this process. And also, indeed, thanking all the staff who have been brilliant and excellent over this period of the pandemic. We and Councillor Bailey is right. Sometimes our residents and even councillors sometimes take it for granted what council officers do, and I think we should be proud of all our officers who have who have sort of come up trumps when they've actually dealt with our residents and in a difficult situation. Mr. Mayor, tonight we are being asked to set a financial envelope for the next year. How that envelope is made up is entirely up to the ruling administration. They can change this at any time throughout the year. Indeed, if the elections go in our favour, we would look to change some items within the overall envelope. The controlling administration can, and most probably would, ignore any amendment to the makeup of the budget if we were to pass it tonight. On many occasions, Councillor Baird has said that you decide the envelope, we'll decide how it's made up, and it's the Cabinet that decides how that envelope is made up. This budget is owned, therefore, by this Conservative administration, and it is based on their priorities. We would do things differently, and our priorities would be very much different. There are, however, some aspects of this budget that we agree with. The William Hall plan, the money for the school to home transport, to name a couple. But there are some proposals that we profoundly disagree with, such as increasing out of hours burial fees, a service used by a particular community and one that has been disproportionately impacted on during this pandemic. Also, the increase in the MOT charge for our taxi drivers, who have no choice but to use Walsall Council's MOT testing garage. This, in our view, is wrong and will negatively affect our frontline workers who have made many sacrifices during the pandemic. We ask that the Conservative administration rethink these increases. The budget put in front of us tonight proposes £29 million of cuts to Walsall. This is at a time where our residents and communities are struggling and need as much help as possible. After a decade of Conservative austerity, we, as a borough, are still facing a government that does not value local government or the communities we serve. The past decade has seen cuts year on year to Walsall's budget from the Conservative government. A total of £106 million of cuts, a staggering figure. This is a continual kick in the teeth to Walsall residents. On top of this, we have a proposed hike of 5%, 4.99, on council tax in this budget. Council tax is increased year on year, with residents paying more and more and getting less and less. This is in the main due to a Conservative government cutting again and again and deeper. A Conservative government that does not understand the struggles of ordinary people who are just about managing. They are indeed extraordinary in managing at times like this. The residents in Walsall are seen as easy pickings for government cuts, and that, Mr. Mayor, is totally wrong. Mr. Mayor, the council tax now makes up 20% of the overall council budget, an increase from 14 to 15% 10 years ago. Walsall residents are having the burden for paying for services put more and more squarely on their shoulders. When the council tax bills arrive, or should I say when Boris's bombshell lands in people's houses, our residents will be rightly angry, frustrated and devastated. The money for Walsall should, I believe, be provided by this Conservative government and not by it putting the burden on our residents. The Conservative government, as reported in the press, have wasted billions on giving contracts to their chums and friends, in some cases even to their neighbours, which brings a different meaning to that old phrase, love thy neighbour. This has been a total waste of money at a time when our residents, like many residents up and down the country, need that support. Mr. Mayor, we are told by this Conservative government that they are helping by putting money into social care. You hear and see grand announcements made at a national level by Conservative politicians and how they will invest money to deal with social care. But, Mr. Mayor, the scandal of this is that they are actually asking our residents to pay for it. The extra money being put in is not from the government, but from local council taxpayers. paying 5% or being proposed to pay 5% this year, with 3% of it being for social care. This, Mr. Mayor, is nothing but a con of the century, a Conservative government against our residents and our communities. The government should step up, in my view, and help the people of Walsall and not make their lives harder. Mr. Mayor, the people of Walsall have suffered so much over this past year, as Councillor Baird has mentioned. People are struggling. Many have lost their jobs or had to cut their hours, or whose businesses are really struggling and just about surviving. The price of utilities is going up. The cost of living is increasing day on day. And tonight we are asked to support the council tax rise and put the people of Walsall through more pain. We will not. We must support the people of Walsall and not a budget that will have our communities suffer more pain. Where the people will rightly ask us, why is the burden on us? Why should we have to pay more every year and get less? This is profoundly unfair, Mr. Mayor, and we will stand with our residents, the people of Walsall, and vote against this budget that increases their council tax by 5%. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me start by adding our thanks and gratitude to the finance team for the sterling work that they've done in keeping this council on track during these unprecedented times. I'd also like to thank and include all levels of management and council staff for the work that they have done across the board to keep essential services running and to assist in all aspects of the fight against COVID-19 and now its variants. I include members in this also for the work many have done within their communities. And yes, it would be churlish of me if I were not to mention the work put in by members of the Cabinet in tackling the many issues that have beset us over the past year. My biggest thanks are reserved for the many volunteers who have helped in so many ways in supporting their communities. Without their help, there are many who would have found it difficult, if not impossible, to have managed during these trying times. I think it's true to say that as a community, we have achieved what we have in spite of central government. I think it's fair to say that the Conservative government has been the one weak link in all that has gone on over the past year. Councillor Bird makes much of badgering government ministers for fair funding for this council in its fight against the pandemic. We should not forget that last year the Prime Minister pledged to fully compensate local councils for the costs incurred because of COVID. You will recall, Councillor Bird, that I said back in June you would have a fight on your hands given the government's record of broken promises in the face of the Novichok incident in Salisbury back in March 2018. The government back then told the Director of Public Health and the council in Salisbury to spend whatever was needed to contain the spread of the effects of Novichok, and they are still waiting to be fully compensated, as are we, for COVID-19. We all know this council, like so many others, has nowhere near been fully compensated for what COVID-19 has cost in extra expenditure and lost income. If you take a look at the pie chart on page 111 of the reports pack, it shows that council tax now accounts for over 20% of the income to the council. Back in 2015, this figure was around 15%. Over the same period, support to local government has declined massively, shifting the burden of tax more and more away from central government onto local council taxpayers. What the public will see tonight is the council wanting to increase their council tax bills by an unsustainable 4.99%. In a sleight of hand, the government has shifted blame away from itself and onto local councils, whilst at the same time telling the public they've given councils billions to meet their needs. And we all know that this is not true. Don't take my word for it. Even the Local Government Association, which is currently chaired by Conservatives, says it only amounts to 86% of what local governments needs. And even then, that's only if councils increase the council tax by the maximum allowed 4.99%. Councillor Bird knows this, and I know he's tried to get his government to match pound for pound money this council has lost in income and spent on fighting COVID-19. Hardly a meeting goes by without him criticising them. Am I not right, Councillor Bird? The difference between us, Councillor Bird, is that you voted for this government back in December 2019. I did not. So where does this 14% shortfall come from? How do we make up the difference? Do we cut back even further than already has been done? Let's face it, the Cabinet have had to make some difficult cuts in the past 8 to 9 months just to ensure that last year's budget balanced. There's a lot of things that the council did a year ago, it no longer does. There were things that were going to be done, which now won't happen until 2022 or even 2023. Don't get me wrong, there are some good things that have come out of the nightmare of a year that we've had, not least of which is the way communities across the borough have responded to this god-awful pandemic. Much has been said about resilient communities model, but in no way is that perfect. Some communities are more resilient than others for many reasons. Their socio-economic mix, their age profile, and their ethnicity mix. As a result, in spite of all the hard work and effort put in by volunteers, there are those who have not been reached and have been left behind. So, as a council, we should be doing more to build capacity in those less resilient communities. We should be putting more resources in to help those who have been left behind. Voting for this budget strips out around £500,000 from communities. That's £500,000 that could have been and should have been ploughed back into fight inequality in our more deprived communities. Democracy is also another casualty of the pandemic. Under the current administration, decision-making has moved further and further away from the people. Power has become centralised and in many instances now rests only with an elitist few. One thing that life as a councillor has taught me over the years is that most people, wherever they're from, are looking for the same thing. They're not trying to get filthy rich. They don't expect someone else to do what they can do for themselves, but they do expect that if they're willing to work, they should be able to find a job that supports their family. They expect that they shouldn't go bankrupt just because they get sick. They expect that their kids should be able to get a good education, and they want to feel safe in their homes and secure in their local community. And they figure that after a lifetime of work, they should be able to retire with dignity and respect. And that's about it. It's not a lot to wish for, is it? And although the folk don't expect the council to solve all their problems, they do know that with a slight change of priorities, councils could provide the help they need. This budget is full of bling projects designed to catch the attention of the media. It's a budget full of cuts in all the wrong places. It is a budget that fails to give the people of Walsall the changes and engagement needed to let them reimagine their futures. It will come as no surprise that we will not be supporting the proposals before us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shiers. Councillor Jevons.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for calling me in. Hold on, just get my camera going. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to echo a lot of the sentiments mentioned there by Councillor Shiers and Councillor Nawaz. Though I'll start by welcoming a balanced budget in spite of the year that we've had. It's certainly a testament to the prudence and the insight of our council finance team, to whom I also pay tribute. And whilst I'm paying tribute, I'd also like to pay as a councillor that represents and lives in WS27 to all the officers and volunteers that have recently taken part in that great effort, helping people people out with the South African variant testing. I welcome the investments, of course, that are in this budget. I said last year budgets are a package. They obviously are. There are capital investments in here that are to be welcomed in schools, investments in the railway stations and the master plan for Walsall and Willenhall, which I also worked upon as deputy leader in the Labour administration, Labour coalition administration, sorry, back in 2016 to 18. Now, our budget, it balances this year, and the cuts that were projected in October of around 33.7 million have been revised down to 29 million. But we must remember that around £3.5 million, apparently, looks like it's been rephased to the following 2 years. So the pain hasn't all gone away. Miraculously, the government are finding, supposedly, cash to support our council, though Councillor Bird's having to chase it. This support is to help us through the pandemic, and that's great. But let's remember that I first saw a budget in the council chamber in 2011, and the gross expenditure there was £711 million. Today, the gross expenditure is £658 million. So it's lower than 2011 by a fair chunk. And then you have to add inflation on top. There is a huge reality gap. And that's why we've had cuts. To have a budget with no cuts, in my estimation, we would need a council tax rise of around 27%. Well, 4.99% is going to hit our people hard. So that clearly is unsustainable. So what we're seeing, and I agree here with Councillor Shiers, is a transfer of taxation from central government to local government, and the central government are getting off scot-free. This penalises our residents, and it puts our workforce under pressure. You know, these officers that we all salute, and we do, but who are suffering pay freezes and have suffered severance caps when their jobs have been restructured out of the organisation. 10 years of austerity has left places like Walsall absolutely reeling, and COVID's added to that. It isn't fair, and that is why tonight I will most certainly be voting against the budget. Not because I disagree, with the investments that are being made, and I understand that essentially you're setting the size of the shopping basket, Councillor Bird, as you've put it a couple of times, but we would certainly have different goods within the basket. And on that, Mr. Mayor, I'll end and say I'm voting against the budget tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Jevons. Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been some very interesting comments this evening about a government that doesn't understand ordinary people. And that's interesting because what we're doing here is setting Walsall Council's budget, which is what we have control over. And clearly, at the end of the day, what the electorate of this borough have control over in terms of who they elect to run this council. But this is a government who doesn't understand ordinary people. £68.6 million worth of business grants, £28.1 million in rate relief to retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, £5 million council tax hardship payments, £1.3 million housing first to support housing and support for rough sleepers, £828,000 for homeless prevention funding, £800,000 for warm homes funding via the affordable warmth solution, £760,000 for EcoFlex, working with energy partners to help over 300 homes to insulate and keep heating working, £727,000 with winter COVID payments, £690,000 for new burden funding for domestic abuse, £568,000 rough sleepers initiative, £278,000 on test and trace payments, £249,000 for rough sleeper accommodation programme, and the list goes on. And I've not even mentioned the capital money and the capital finance that comes into this council for major works such as Junction 10 and the finance that we're hoping that's going to be coming in to rebuild our railway stations. We have a budget in Walsall that we have had to balance, and frankly, to balance, and I think one of the previous speakers said, to balance the budget this year has been a really tough effort, and we have managed to do it. And we've managed to do it by being a sensible administration and not investing in shopping centres that are, frankly, making a massive loss for this council when it was supposed to earn money for this council. So the government have invested in Walsall. They continue to invest in Walsall, and we will continue to keep the finances on track in Walsall Borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a budget from a Tory administration under a Tory government. We would have a very different set of priorities to slice up the basket of funds available to ensure care for the most vulnerable in our community and those who are at the bottom of the pile. We would support the most vulnerable families who are faced with a choice of putting a meal on the table or not. And where would this come from? Now, we might think that £70 a year isn't very much, but that many families are down to their last few pennies, and they're also forced with having to think about claiming for free school meals, which again, especially in school holidays, puts an enormous burden upon a family. So that needs to be taken into account. There is an extra cost for all those children who unfortunately need to be taken into care or play with foster parents, who now stands at 671, an unknown number currently hidden by the pandemic. And also an unknown number of residents who are suffering from the after effects of post-COVID damage, and they also may need direct social care support. The permanent damage to a whole generation of young people who've missed a whole year of face-to-face teaching, and with serious long-term damage to their mental health and anxiety levels. This issue will take urgent attention and as a somewhat unknown cost. The extra cost to public health will need attention as we try and apply health and wellbeing measures to the joint activities of the council with the CCG. I noticed also a £5 million loan to the airport, which does seem a little bit strange to at this particular time where money is very short. So the cost of test and trace, which is currently going to do when as the schools go back, and the actual cost of providing the PPE equipment is another on the list of not being recompensed by this government. There's no central government have sold Walsall down the river somewhat, and it should be central government that is supporting this council to ensure that we don't have such a council tax rise. We don't have the voting numbers to challenge realistically this budget, but the public will have a memory, and as they go to the polls in May. There you go.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Barker. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was responding to something Councillor Andrews said. He read out a list of things the government is giving us. But I think what all they are doing is proportionately giving us pennies to replace the pounds that have been cut by this government over the past 5.5 years. One might say that what they are giving us is too little, too late, and ordinary people in this borough will suffer as a consequence. Thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Rashad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome the budget, and I agree what Councillor Andrew has said. This is the most difficult, challenging in our life. I don't think our parents or the grandparents ever faced this pandemic in our life. What I feel, the government has done whatever it can do to overcome these difficulties, particularly excellent with the furlough scheme. Our local team has distributed over 46 million business grants. So, so those who are criticizing our administration and the government need to understand that this is not a normal circumstances. The government has spent millions and billions of pounds throughout the country. Under the leadership of Mike Bird, I know Mike Bird has tried his utmost to get more money for the Walsall Council and this area, bring more investment. So we should be supporting this administration, and I will certainly be supporting my leader and the deputy leader.
Thank you, Councillor Usap. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to say thank you to all our senior finance officers for taking the hard work in difficult circumstances in doing this budget for us today. So they need to be given appreciation for that. I won't be voting for the budget today, and it's for reason being that the leader of the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister of this country, said to us in Walsall, whatever you need, you'll get for every pound you spend. Because of this pandemic, because of this virus, he will support the people of Walsall and the residents of Walsall. That hasn't happened. And the thing is, we've had austerity for over a decade now, cuts after cuts every year. People are still suffering from poverty, from inequalities, and this pandemic has made the situation a lot worse. And the inequalities have increased, especially in certain communities. So with regards to the issue of this council tax raise of 4.9%, and this is going to be another bombshell, a burden on the residents who at the moment are suffering hardship and struggled with cuts to their salaries, losing jobs, trying to put food on the table for their children. It's a scandal. We shouldn't have to go through this in Walsall. And the thing is, I know Councillor Andrews said what the government has given people of Walsall, what he has done for the people of Walsall, but Councillor Barker is quite right. In the grand scheme of things, it's pennies compared to the millions we need to support the people of Walsall. And I think this budget is not equitable, it's not fair, and I'll be voting against the budget today.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think all I've seen tonight really is people criticising the administration and criticising the budget. What I don't see is an alternative budget. And from my understanding, we've all had the same data, and I'm looking for that alternative budget and those alternative options. I think it's easy to be critical rather than produce an alternative. I'd also like to see the opposition balance the budget themselves, and I want to commend the leader and the finance officers for balancing the budget. It's been a hard task. And there's only so many people, in my view, that could do it. The leader's one of them, and the officers supporting have been fantastic. So it's no surprise I'll be supporting the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Forgive me, I was elected for the first time in 2015, so quite new to this game compared to a lot of you. I thought we were voting on what the budget what we've actually put together for Walsall Council, not what is being done by central government that we have no control over. And I'd just like to sort of commend the senior staff and the cabinet for putting together something when we're all under sort of immense pressure with this COVID, and to actually find the time to actually get a budget together at a time when everything else is sort of going on. I'd just like to commend all the cabinet for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Rickin.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the staff as well who've worked incredibly hard over the last 18 months or so. There's been a lot of transformation happening in the council already, and then COVID came along as well, and obviously accelerated a lot of things. And I think this budget is something which sticks up for people who need jobs. I think it helps our infrastructure with 2 new train stations and possibly more down the line. I think that without any alternative from opposition members, it's just purely hot air. If you're so capable of forming a decent budget, where is it? And then we could all have the chance to vote on it. And actually, you know what, as well, if the Sadler Centre hadn't gone pear-shaped, perhaps we'd be in a stronger position.
Thank you, Councillor King. Does anybody else want to speak? No. Thank you, Councillor Bird. You have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the right to reply I will look forward to. Well, it's interesting for the members of the public who are watching this meeting. We have a process, and we have a process where a budget goes out to a scrutiny committee. And the people who have criticised this budget, Councillor Shires, Councillor Nawaz, Councillor Hussain, Councillor Jevons, all of those, and if I've missed anybody out, please correct me. They all have an input into that to scrutinise the budget. And what did they offer in that scrutiny? Zero. Absolutely nothing. Because they are devoid of ideas. And to criticise the government, which of course is Councillor Ian Shires' regular thing, he forgets we talk about Novichok in Bristol. I'm afraid that when Mr. Clegg, who's now living a lifestyle of luxury in California, who was then the leader, we are not going to put up tuition fees, but he did, because like all Liberals, it's power at any cost. And to believe me, the two Liberals that sit on this council of 60 certainly won't be sitting in my camp anytime soon. And as a result, the criticism he levies at this government, quite honestly, is appalling. And his colleague by Councillor Barker, likewise. They haven't written the rule book about a pandemic. And yes, looking back, we can all have 2020 vision. Oh, we wouldn't have done that. No, we wouldn't have done that either. But you forget that some of the things we've done were anticipation of what could go wrong. We've had to contribute towards a national mortuary in the airport. It's never been used, thankfully, but we had to make provision for it. And that came as a cost to this council and the other 6 metropolitan boroughs. And as a result, we owe it to the people of Walsall and the wider West Midlands to make sure that we're in a position to give them the best opportunities going forward and to protect them as we have done. It's interesting that Councillor Nawaz mentions 2 items in the budget, out of hours funerals. He omits to say that we're now looking for full cost recovery because we've been doing this as a subsidised service. And as a result, he may have missed it, but I'll give him the line anyway. It is now open to all communities, not just one. All communities can now have a 7-day burial, should they wish, but it comes at a cost. The second point is, I do take on board the MOT charges, but it is our duty to make sure that the taxis and the private hire vehicles that run around this town are in actual fact in good working order. I go back about 10 years now when I would never get in a taxi because they were in such an appalling state. And by doing what we're doing and making sure they're tested regularly, we make sure that our residents are safe when they either book a taxi or private hire or hail one down. It's interesting as well, we criticise the government, they haven't done enough. Well, in this particular case in Walsall, we've had £161 million of the grant. £161 million grant. What that means, you haven't got to give it back, just in case you don't do finances very well. As a result, I think that we've saved many, many businesses, and I think we should be proud of what we've achieved. You could have joined in that pride because it was a level playing field for all elected members to take credit for it. You can shake your head, Councillor Shires, but quite honestly, your input to the budget was absolutely zero. And in actual fact, I don't know whether you actually understand the figures before you. But at the end of the day, the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, what about the levy that he's putting on Councillor Nawaz? You admit that. And I would say to you now, if any of our residents cannot afford 24 pence a day for a council that has become a facilitator, rather than a provider, because that's what we do. We facilitate. And as a result, I will pay tribute to those people who have worked during this pandemic in the resilient communities model, which incidentally, Councillor Shires and Councillor Nuage, you voted against it. I just thought I'd remind you about that. And without that, we wouldn't have been able to provide the services and the many, many thousands of meals we've given to the people who are housebound, and the befriending service, and indeed the volunteers, of which many of my colleagues have, down at the street school, been packing those food parcels. So I'm afraid, you know, it's a little bit churlish for you to criticise the budget when your input has been absolute zero. And as a result, I think the comment was well made. Where is your alternative? You haven't got one. You haven't got one. Yes, it's right to say, Councillor Noyes, and I do accept you need the numbers. You could, perhaps sometime in the future, have those numbers. Thankfully, the Liberals never will have. There will be 2 or less going forward, and let's hope the May election will see the people understand what a Conservative administration has done in the time of a pandemic. It goes on to say, quite rightly, Councillor Jevons makes the point, we've gone from 711 to 658 million. Well, you know, that's 53 million reduction if you haven't worked it out, Councillor Jevons. I don't want to disturb your appearances on social media, because this is probably a little more important. But at the end of the day, I come back to the point, that's 24 pence a day. But I defy you to tell me and the members of the public where the cuts that you refer to on a regular basis are. I would argue there are efficiencies from working differently and smarter, which is what the PROUD programme was for. What we have done, not only have we put something in place, we've checked to make sure it works. I'll come back to Ian Robertson. Can I remind you, Ian, that it was Liam Byrne in the last Labour government who left the note saying there ain't no money. You'd spent it all. Do you remember that? So please don't criticise this Conservative government who are bailing out what you left behind. Just for the record, again, something you may not know, the so-called loan to the airport is a multinational business, is what a man wrote to me. Yes, and I replied to him, we own it. I don't know whether you knew that, Ian, but we do. And the airport is a national and regional asset. It's a regional asset to us. And if you look back to the dividends that this council has received over the last 10 years, you should hang your head in shame, because that dividend has enabled us to provide services that we would have to have cut, whether it be a Labour administration or a Conservative administration. And I sincerely hope those days will come back, because the airport is very much like a pension fund investment. It's not a quick return tomorrow, but it is a long-term investment, not only for this council, but for the region. And we need to punch our weight, and that airport allows us to do that, with the HS2 interchange going right next to the airport and the Sprint bus taking our Walsall residents direct to the airport. It's right and proper that we put that money in. Councillor Barker, well, quite honestly, I cast that aside because his input was actually not meaningful in my view. The fact of the matter is, we are an administration, and I'm very proud that I've had a cabinet who have supported me 100% along the way. Yes, it's been tough. Over the last 15 months, I've regularly had calls and meetings with the chief exec until 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, 7 days a week. I don't know what a weekend is anymore. I don't know what a day off is anymore. And that's what the effort that the cabinet members have had to put in. And I think I respect all of the people who have put the effort in on the resilient communities model, not least of all my colleague Councillor Perry, who in actual fact has worked tirelessly to make sure that model works. And I could name many officers who have contributed to that, but it would be wrong, because if you leave somebody out, then quite honestly, you know, it would be wrong to do so. I think it was Margaret Thatcher's husband who once coined a phrase which I really enjoy. If whales don't spout, they don't get shot. Well, I'm glad that I'm full of bullet holes, and I continue to be full of bullet holes, because I will work for Walsall Council and for Walsall residents as long as I've got breath in my body to give them the best service, along with my cabinet colleagues. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend the budget to the meeting.
Thank you, councillor Bird. I now invite members to move any amendments to the motion. Any amendments? No amendments. Thank you, Tony. As there are no amendments and the original motion has been debated, I shall now move to the vote on the motion as put by councillor Bird. As this matter requires a recorded vote, I shall now call upon the monitoring officer to undertake a roll call on the motion. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall now call each member in turn and ask that you state whether you are for, against or abstain from the motion. I shall confirm the result at the end of the recorded vote. Councillor Bird.
In favour.
Councillor Nawaz.
Against.
Councillor Shires.
Against.
Councillor Ali.
In favour.
Councillor Allen.
In favour.
Councillor Andrew.
In favour.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Bashir.
Against.
Councillor Seabot.
Against.
Councillor Peabot.
Against.
Councillor Burley.
Against.
Councillor Butler.
In favour.
Councillor Chatter.
In favour.
Councillor Clark.
In favour.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor D. Coughlin. Councillor D. Coughlin.
Sorry, I had a problem getting my mute off. Against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor S. Coughlin.
Understanding, but against.
Councillor Craddock.
In favour.
Councillor S. Ditter.
Against.
Councillor Douglas Moore.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Against.
Councillor Follows.
In favour.
Councillor Gul-Tasib.
Against.
Councillor Harris.
In favour.
Councillor Harrison.
In favour.
Councillor Hickin.
In favour.
Councillor Hussain.
Against.
Councillor James. Councillor Jevons.
Against.
Councillor Joe Hall.
In favour.
Councillor Dukes.
Against.
Councillor Core.
In favour.
Councillor Longy. Councillor Longy. Councillor Martin.
In favour.
Councillor Mazar.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
In favour.
Councillor Nazreen.
Against.
Councillor A. Nazir.
Against.
Councillor M. Nazir.
Against.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Assab.
Definitely in favour.
Councillor Rattigan.
In favour.
Councillor Robertson.
Against.
Councillor Samra.
In favour.
Councillor Sirohi.
Against.
Councillor Sears.
In favour.
Councillor Sohal.
In favour.
Councillor C. Statham.
In favour.
Councillor M. Statham.
Favour.
Councillor Toe.
In favour.
Councillor Underhill.
Against.
Councillor Ward.
Against.
Councillor Wade.
Against.
Councillor Waters.
100% for.
Councillor Wilson.
In favour.
Councillor Worrell.
Against.
Councillor Young.
Against.
Thank
Point of
you.
order, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Councillor Longy just rang me to say he cast his vote, but unfortunately he's lost his connection. I think he's dialing back in. He did tell me he was in favour, but he'll have to say it himself.
Yes, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I can only take the vote as when someone is technically in the room or not. There is the option, Mr. Mayor, if you wanted to adjourn the meeting for a short time to allow Councillor Longy to try and obtain a connection or dial in. That is entirely a matter for you, Mr. Mayor.
Can you move on with the vote, Tony?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that 30 voted in favour of the item and 26 voted against with no abstentions. As such, the motion is duly carried.
Thank you. I declare that the recommendation is approved as set out. Item 10, recommendation of Personnel Committee, Pay Policy Statement and Living Wage 2021/22. I call upon Councillor Baird to move the recommendations of Personnel Committee.
I move the recommendations as set out, Mr. Mayor.
Duly seconded.
Duly seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Baird, please present the report.
Nothing to add to the report, Mr. Mayor. It has been circulated. I'm just pleased to see that this administration once more is supporting the living wage for the people who, at this point in time, which are few in number, are employed by this council.
Do any members wish to speak? The motion. No. Thank you, Councillor Baird. You have a right to reply.
Nothing to reply to, Mr. Mayor.
As this matter requires a formal decision, I shall now call upon the monitoring officer to undertake a roll call on the motion. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall now call each member in turn and ask that you state whether you are for, against or abstain from the motion. I shall confirm the result at the end of the roll call. Councillor Bird.
In favour.
Councillor Nawaz.
In favour.
Councillor Shires.
For.
Councillor Ali.
In favour.
Councillor Allen.
In favour.
Councillor Andrew.
In favour.
Councillor Barker.
For.
Councillor Bashir.
In favour.
Councillor C. Bott.
In favour.
Councillor P. Bott.
In favour.
Councillor Burley.
For.
Councillor Butler.
In favour.
Councillor Chatter.
In favour.
Councillor Clark.
In for.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor D. Coughlin.
For.
Councillor S. Coughlin.
Having campaigned for this policy and introduced it, I'm pleased to support.
Councillor Craddock.
In favour.
Councillor Ditter.
For.
Councillor Douglas Small.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
For.
Councillor Follows.
In favour.
Councillor Gultasib.
In favour.
Councillor Harris.
In favour.
Councillor Harrison.
In favour.
Councillor Hickin.
In favour.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor James. Councillor Jevons.
In favour.
Councillor Johal.
In favour.
Councillor Dew.
In favour.
Councillor Core.
In favour.
Councillor Longy.
In favour.
Councillor Martin.
In favour.
Councillor Mazar.
In favour.
Councillor Murray.
In favour.
Councillor Nasreen.
In favour.
Councillor A. Nazir.
For.
Councillor M. Nazir.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Assab.
In favour.
Councillor Rattigan.
In favour.
Councillor Robertson.
In favour.
Councillor Samra,
In favour.
Councillor Sirohi,
In favour.
Councillor Sears,
In favour.
Councillor Sohal,
In favour.
Councillor C. Statham,
In favour.
Councillor M. Statham,
Favour.
Councillor Toe,
In favour.
Councillor Underhill,
In favour.
Councillor Ward,
In favour.
Councillor Wade,
For.
Councillor Waters,
In favour.
Councillor Wilson,
In favour.
Councillor Worrell,
For.
Councillor Young.
4.
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that all members present and voting voted in favour of the motion with none against and no abstentions, and as such the motion is carried.
Thank you, Tony. I declare that the recommendation is approved as set out. Item 11, appointment of independent person. I call upon Councillor Rassab to move the recommendations as set out on the summary. Councillor Rassab.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hereby move the recommendation.
Can I have a seconder? Can I have a seconder?
Mr. Mayor, could I second that, please?
Thank you. I had my mute button on.
Councillor Rassab, please present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appointing independent persons is a challenging for all the authorities, and so I am pleased to present 3 high caliber candidates to the council for approval. These appointments will join the existing independent person to ensure that the council is quite rightly held to account by impartial and objective individuals. There is a further vacancy for an independent person, an audit, and this is in the process of being advertised. I would like to thank officers for undertaking a robust and transparent recruitment exercise.
Thank you. Do any members wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Craddock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rassab kind of took away some of the things I was going to say, so thank you, Wahid. The independent members provide a valuable service to the council. I would like to put on record our thanks to Andy Green, who I've worked with on a number of years on the audit committee, and I know he also works on the standards committee as well. Without him and without his direction on audit, we would not have had such a high quality examination of the council's functions. So I think we should personally thank Andy Green for his time as an independent member. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Craddock. Councillor Underhill. Councillor Underhill.
Sorry, Paul, I apologise. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Just to say really that I'm pleased about this. We have had some extremely good independent members in the past. We lost one, unfortunately, who we would have really liked to have held on to. But with the people that have come with us have applied from all over, actually not just Walsall, which is rather good. I'm perhaps a little bit disappointed that the remuneration that we're offering them is only £750. The work that they have to do is quite surprising. I know Tony will agree with me on this, Tony Cox. They have a lot of work to do. They have, they're called on quite often to judge people and how they're working. And I know that without these people, we couldn't carry on the way we're going. So Standards Committee, I can only speak for, but I know that Audit Committee is having the same kind of response. We have got 3 extremely good people who are coming on now. And I just am really pleased to say that we've got them. Hopefully we hold on to them. And I hope that they enjoy the time they're with us as well.
Thank you, Councillor Underhill. Thank you. Councillor Rabb, you have a right of reply. Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no further to add.
Thank you. As this matter requires a formal decision, I shall now call upon the monitoring officer to undertake a roll call on the motion. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall now call each member in turn and ask that you state whether you are for, against, or abstain from the motion. I shall confirm the result at the end of the roll call. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Nawaz,
4.
Councillor Shires,
4.
Councillor Ali,
4.
Councillor Allen,
In favour.
Councillor Andrew,
4.
Councillor Barker,
In favour.
Councillor Bashir,
4.
Councillor Seabot,
4.
Councillor Peabot,
4.
Councillor Burley,
4.
Councillor Butler,
4.
Councillor Chatter,
4.
Councillor Clark,
4.
Councillor Cooper,
4.
Councillor D. Coughlin,
4.
Councillor S. Coughlin,
4.
Councillor Craddock,
4.
Councillor Ditter,
4.
Councillor Douglas Moore,
4.
Councillor Ferguson,
4.
Councillor Fitzpatrick,
4.
Councillor Follows,
4.
Councillor Gulter-Sib,
4.
Councillor Harris,
4.
Councillor Harrison,
4.
Councillor Hickin,
4.
Councillor Hussain,
4.
Councillor Jevons,
4.
Councillor Johal,
4.
Councillor Dukes,
4.
Councillor Core,
4.
Councillor Longy,
4.
Councillor Martin,
4.
Councillor Mazar,
4.
Councillor Murray, 4. Councillor Nazreen,
4.
Councillor A. Nazir,
4.
Councillor M. Nazir,
4.
Councillor Perry,
4.
Councillor Rasab,
4.
Councillor Rattigan,
4.
Councillor Robertson,
4.
Councillor Samra,
In favour.
Councillor Sirohi,
4.
Councillor Sears,
4.
Councillor Sohal,
4.
Councillor C. Statham,
4.
M. Statham,
5.
Councillor Toe,
4.
Councillor Underhill,
4.
Councillor Ward,
4.
Councillor Wade,
For Independent Remuneration Panel for elected members' remuneration for England, and remove the obligation for elected members to vote on any recommendations made by such a panel. This would bring the determination of elected members' allowances in line with the members' allowance scheme currently in place in Wales under Part 8 of the Members' Payments and Pensions of Local Government Wales measure, which was 2011. I then went on to say, obviously MPs' pay and expenses are regulated and administered by the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, or IPSA as we know it. However, it is accepted that members of Parliament still vote on the recommendations from IPSA. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank...
Sorry, Leader. Sorry to interrupt you mid-flow. Just to confirm, we did have a slight issue with our YouTube feed, so we're monitoring that. But I've just been advised that we're okay again to go now. Sorry, Leader. Sorry to interrupt, but we just need to make sure that the public are able to view the meeting in its entirety. Please continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for doing your job. Thank you. Can I just say that, it is always extremely difficult, and I would pay my tribute and thanks to Professor Leach, who for the last number of years, I think he's done all 10 years, has recommended to this council an increase of members' allowances, which we have duly ignored. But I don't intend to do that tonight. I think there's come a time when, yes, members' allowances, when you look across the country, we are out of step quite considerably in relation to some authorities, if not all. There aren't people queuing up to be elected members. It is a job, and it's become more of a job. I think Professor Leach has said within his report, there is more work now for 22% less pay than it was in 2011. I've known through this pandemic, and I said earlier, that weekends and holidays are something of the past. Not only just for me, but for any member who is in a position of the Cabinet, or indeed, in many cases, scrutiny process, taking through the work that this pandemic has created. It is a fact that there will be those that will criticise the move being made tonight. But what it does do, it places on record the opportunity of people who are on low income, who can come and stand as an elected member and be rewarded for that, even though it is a small amount of money. I do believe that we should not put people who are on low income at a disadvantage because they can't give public service, because they are having to get time off from work. Members will know that I've been here quite a fair amount of years now, and Ian Shires will also remember when we started this, we used to get little or nothing. I think it was £5.68 for a meeting then. So I think that the job has changed dramatically. It has now become more professional. You need more professional qualification, if you like, to actually, as we have just seen tonight, do a budget. The councillor's role is to create policy. And as a result, officers' role is to implement that policy. But first of all, you have to be able to be here and attend meetings during working hours, and in actual fact, in many cases, reduce your hours at your day and place of work to enable you to do that. Working from home has seen much change in how the council operates. And what it has done is being living over the shop has meant more and more call upon people's time and indeed expense in the job they do. I have no hesitation in saying, and I always have, that people should be paid the rate for the job. And the leader of the day, whoever that may be, if the hours you put in are equivalent to what I've been doing for the last 12, 18 months, it works out at about £12.50 an hour. And that's only just above the living wage. As a result, I think it is important for people to understand that it is quite contentious to have to vote on your own salary. And I think it's about time that the government did in actual fact put an independent body in place, not just for this council, but the whole of the councils for the UK, who no doubt after tonight will be receiving that abuse that you get on social media. And it's disappointing now to see that when you stand for public office, it is so easy for people to abuse you and your family, which has no recompense whatsoever. I know we could all relate to that. And as a result, I have no hesitation in moving the recommendations within this report.
Can I have a seconder?
Sorry. Formally seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Do any members wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to extend my thanks as well to Professor Leach and just say I really enjoyed speaking to him. Actually, I perhaps kept him a bit too long because I think he was almost trying to get away from me in the end. But I mean, a lot of the comments made by Councillor Bird, I certainly share in regards to this should be something that gets set at a national level rather than getting councillors to vote on their own pay. Councillor allowances are always a difficult and controversial decision as it requires those of us who are benefiting from an increase to actually vote on it. And that never goes down well with the public because they look at that and they see us voting for ourselves. The system on setting allowances, in my view, is very wrong, and the level should be set nationally for all local authorities to accept automatically. It is also a way to keep some of that consistency across the country, and the report actually talks about the levels of inconsistency across the country. However, as a system, in my view, is wrong and not the way it should be, and not the way we would want it. And I believe this perhaps not the right time to bring this to council. I'll be voting against it, and my group will be voting against it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I very much agree with what Councillor Nawaz and Councillor Bird have actually said about these actual pay rises. I mean, I would find it very, very uncomfortable accepting pay rise. In fact, since I qualified as a dentist in 1967, I've always given at least 10% of my income to charitable causes. And that has continued, of course, myself being a councillor, which would have resulted in an enormous amount of overseas aid and restoring an orphanage in Tatarai in Romania and a large number of other water wells and aid convoys and all sorts of things, which has been extremely satisfying. And that is another option, of course. If you don't, I'm in a very fortunate position, having a very good NHS pension, and so I would not want to depend on it. But I do recognise that a number of people, it would be an important part of their income, and it's only right that they should actually get it, to have a fair sort of return for the effort they're putting in and the time they're putting in, maybe losing time from work and money from work. So I think that is always another option for those of us who are in a fortunate position to be getting a very good pension, etc., to be able to forego that and donate that to good causes, which is their right, of course, but it's not compulsory.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say I agree with much what others have said in respect to this particular issue. We shouldn't be the ones that are voting for our own remuneration. It is a conflict of interest. Having said that, we are where we are, and I think that it's wrong to make this move at a time when so many people out there have lost jobs, are on reduced money, and have got issues going forward with regards to how resilient their jobs might be once COVID is controlled. So I won't be supporting the motion before us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, yeah, it is rather difficult when you're voting on your pay. It's something that none of us would like to do, but I would like to compare the leader of the council non-political compared to the leader of the council political, who gets quite a small percentage of what the other chief executive does actually get. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Does anybody else want to speak? Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Bird, you have the right to reply. Councillor Bird.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, when I did see Councillor S. Coughlin raise a hand, I'm assuming Councillor Coughlin, you no longer wish to speak. Councillor Coughlin.
I do wish to speak, sorry.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to call Councillor Coughlin.
Councillor Coughlin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, I understand the situation people are in on discussing their own pay rises, and Councillor Mike Bird is quite right and right to challenge the government on putting us in this position. But we're in this position, and I have a track record of not only voting against the pay rises, but we also, on the Labour side, have a track record of also reducing extra responsibilities that I'm sure put the council in a position where Councillor Mike Bird thinks it should be more, and I appreciate that. Personally, I think it's this moment in time that's the problem. I agree with Ian Shires that we just set a budget that's took £29 million of services away from the people of Walsall, and to then sit and talk about giving ourselves a pay rise, I just find it obscene. I'm sure Mike finds it obscene, but I think, well, he doesn't, because I can see him on screen. But just for the benefit of Councillor Wilson, can I just say that some of us have a track record of not wanting these pay rises or not needing them. It hasn't put people off coming forward. We have a queue of people to come forward. I'm sure, as has been regaled to me on many occasions by members from the opposite party, Sucky Samba has got a queue a mile long of people who want to become Tory councillors. So I think we've also got a track record, Councillor Wilson, of setting budgets, balanced budgets. But I just want to make it clear that this moment in time, I honestly feel there is the wrong time to be putting wages up for councillors when we've talked about how hard it is for our communities to survive under the problems that we all face. So I'll be pleased of being part of Councillor Nawaz's Labour team to actually vote against this pay rise.
Thank you, Councillor Coughlin. Councillor Baird, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's interesting. I come back to, first of all, Councillor Coughlin. Do I think it's obscene? No, I don't. I've always said that people should be paid for the rate for the job. And Councillor Coughlin's track record of budget, it is well known. You want to go look at the budget of Pulfrey CA when we lost £1 million to this council and all of the people there lost their job. And I have to say that was a good way to run the budget.
Mr. Mayor, can I interject there that this council, Walsall Council, did not lose £1 million.
Councillor Coughlin,
whatever happened.
Councillor Coughlin, there's now questions, Councillor Coughlin. It's Councillor Baird's right to reply. There's now questions. It's Councillor Baird's right to reply. Councillor Baird.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The comments I make are freely available on the company's, on the Insolvency Services website, and members of the public can check that. It's free, and you'll find that I am telling the truth. Can I just say that whilst I appreciate Councillor Nawaz's position, and in actual fact, no doubt he and everybody who votes against it won't claim it. And as a result, I say publicly, put in a Freedom of Information request in 6 months' time, and I'll ask you then, members of the public, how many people who voted against it don't claim the allowance. And I'll tell you, it'll probably be 1 or 2, but the rest of them that vote against it because it looks politically good will claim that allowance. It's all right for the Labour group to turn around and say, well, we're not going to claim this, it's wrong. Is it wrong for the member of the fire service to claim another £10,000 on top of the service, the salary that's been offered to elected members as we speak? Nothing wrong with that. No doubt that particular individual contributes all of the efforts to warrant that £10,000. Is it wrong for a member of the Transport Committee to claim an extra £8,000 outside of this council for extra work that that particular individual takes? Is it wrong for any mayor or incoming mayor not to have the allowance that's awarded to them for the amount of work that they have to do? So what I would say is this: don't be hypocritical. If you're going to vote against it, then make it public that you're not going to claim for it, because you can have my word that when and if, as it is in the public domain, people want to see how hypocritical people are tonight in voting that. Well, I'm not hypocritical, because what I would say is this. Not only do we respect the work the Cabinet members do, I've heard the comments being made by all members tonight about the work that our officers do. So what I'm telling you now is something that perhaps your in-depth knowledge of the budget you didn't see. And that is this. First of all, if the vote is carried tonight, the members' allowance will come into effect in the next municipal year. So, should there be a change of administration, Councillor Nawaz, and indeed probably ably assisted by Councillor Shires if he wins his election, then he will be able to reverse that trend. And this will be a named vote, so the public will know. But I'll go further than that. And what I'll say is this, that I have today instructed the Chief Executive to convene a special meeting of the Personnel Committee when this administration will repatriate the 1% that Councillor Coughlin took off all employees at a budget meeting, at a Personnel Committee meeting in 2017-18 budget. And as I say, that will be a repatriation of £1,010,500, which puts the allowance being offered to members to pale into insignificance. Yes, it was in the budget. Yes, you were scrutinising it so well, you didn't see it. But I say now, I respect the officers that have supported me, and as a result, it is this administration's way of saying thank you. We will put that back 1%. £1,010,500. That's what you are getting your members' allowances for a professional cabinet to give professional decisions, and so that our staff know that they can respect the decisions that are being made are in their interest and in the interest of the people of Walsall. That's why we got elected, not to fill our own pockets, as some people believe, but to carry out the duties which now are more extensive than they ever have been. So, Mr. Mayor, with that, I commend it to the council for that vote.
Thank you, councillor Bird. As this matter requires a formal decision, I shall now call upon the monitoring officer to undertake a roll call on the motion. Tony Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall now call each member in turn and ask that you state whether you are for, against, or abstain from the motion. I shall confirm the result at the end of the roll call. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
Against.
Councillor Shires.
Against.
Councillor Ali.
For.
Councillor Allen.
In favour.
Councillor Andrew.
For.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Bashir.
Against.
Councillor C-Bot.
Abstain.
Councillor P-Bot.
Against.
Councillor Burley.
Against.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Chatter.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor D. Coughlin.
Against.
Councillor S. Coughlin.
Against.
Councillor Craddock.
For.
Councillor Ditter.
Against.
Councillor Douglas Moore.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Against.
Councillor Follows.
For.
Councillor Gultasib.
Against.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Hickin.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
Against.
Councillor James. Councillor Jevons.
Against.
Councillor Johal.
For.
Councillor Jukes.
Against.
Councillor Core.
For.
Councillor Longy.
For.
Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Mazar.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Nazreen.
Against.
Councillor A. Nazir.
Against.
Councillor M. Nazir.
Against.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Rassab.
For.
Councillor Rattigan.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
Against.
Councillor Samra.
For.
Councillor Sarohi.
Against.
Councillor Sears.
For.
Councillor Sohal.
For.
Councillor C. Statham.
For.
Councillor M. Statham. Councillor Toe.
For.
Councillor Underhill.
Against.
Councillor Ward.
Against.
Councillor Wade.
Against.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
For.
Councillor Worrell.
Against.
Councillor Young.
Against.
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that 31 voted in favour of the motion, 25 against the motion with 1 abstention. Therefore, the motion is carried.
Thank you, Tony. I declare that the recommendation is approved as set out. Item 13, membership of committees. This item is for noting only, and so, unless one indicates that they wish to speak by raising their hand, I shall take it that the council accepts and notes the changes. Before I close the meeting, I want to speak to members and the general public. This is the last council meeting that I will be mayor, because annual council takes place in May. I would like, on behalf of Councillor Chris Bott, Mayoress, to thank the National Health Service, Manor Hospital, care home carers, school teachers, track and trace, vaccination centres, and all the volunteers